Marshall Peak, Chapter 5988, Battle to the Death, Marshall Peak. In a flash, the two silhouettes collided and a fight broke out. Yang Kai took the offensive and pushed out Dao strengths with each strike. He had to release the Dao strengths which had accumulated inside his body, otherwise, he ran the risk of exploding. As a result of his ferocious attacks, Mo had to focus and fight back as well, using black ink strength to clash with and wipe out the rampaging Dao strengths. Even in the midst of the fight, Yang Kai did not stop devouring the space-time river. There was a large vortex behind him that was sucking the river water into his body. As Yang Kai continued absorbing Dao strength into his body, the power he could wield grew stronger and his attacks became more intense. After exchanging a dozen blows, Yang Kai suffered a hit from Mo and flew backwards into the river. However, he soon emerged and charged at Mo once again. Although he faced setbacks, Yang Kai showed no sign of despair. Instead, his thirst for battle grew even stronger. During the first clash between the two, Mo could send Yang Kai flying back into the river as soon as he emerged. Despite being a Ninth Order master, Yang Kai could not fight back at all. Yet, he could now hold out against Mo for a brief moment. This was the result of his absorbing the Dao strengths into his body. It was also the reason why he could control even more of the river's power. I can do better than this. Yang Kai firmly believed, as long as I can control the entire river, I'll be powerful enough to challenge Mo. Time and time again, he shot out at Mo and was knocked back. The space-time river continued to shrink as Yang Kai's aura grew even more powerful. As time passed, Yang Kai was able to hold out against Mo for increasing amounts of time. From withstanding an exchange of 10 or so blows, he was able to slowly increase that number to 20, 30, eventually reaching 100 without showing any sign of falling behind. This seemed to set Mo off and his attacks grew even more vicious as murderous intent surged. Yang Kai used the profound source gate to suppress and seal over 30% of Mo's source, which weakened the latter by a fair amount. Mo's power had also been further weakened after the fight with Zhong Ruo Shi. That being said, he had corrupted a sizable chunk of the river's power with black ink strength, which allowed him to make up for what he lost in the fight with Zhong Ruo Shi. Mo was even more powerful now than when he first woke up. In a short amount of time, Yang Kai was able to go from being completely powerless against Mo to just barely holding out against him, but that was already his limit. He couldn't defeat Mo in his current state. Not enough. Not nearly enough. Even if I gain control over the remaining river, it's unlikely that I'll be able to kill him. If Mo, the one behind everything, did not die, then the threat against all of existence would endure. Using the profound source gate to suppress and seal Mo's source had been the right thing to do. Yang Kai's previous journey had proved that the profound source gate could indeed accomplish that feat. However, when one went up against an entity this powerful, how was one supposed to suppress and seal them without defeating them first? The only way to end this once and for all was to break out of the shackles of the open heaven realm and ascend to a higher realm. However, this was something impossible for the current Yang Kai. It had not been long since he became a Ninth Order master, and although he used the 2 open heaven realm cradles and the power of his space-time river to speed up his cultivation dramatically, it was only effective for him to grow within the Ninth Order realm. It was not enough for him to reach the realm beyond. Throughout history, the best and most talented humans had been limited by the shackles of the open heaven realm method. They could not break through them at all. Only Mu had been able to vaguely peek into the mysteries of an even higher martial Dao. Nevertheless, her space-time river was incomplete and she could not step over the barriers to enter the mysterious realm she touched upon. Even though Yang Kai had received Mu's gift, it was unlikely that he could accomplish what Mu and all the human race ancestors could not in such a short time. He did not have the barest inkling of enlightenment regarding the next realm. If he wanted to break out of the shackles of the open heaven realm, at the very least, he had to familiarize himself with his present strength and continue to gain knowledge and understanding through many years of accumulation and cultivation. Since he could not overcome the shackles of the open heaven realm, he had to find another way. Yang Kai dared not allow himself to be distracted for even a moment in his battle against Mo. He was up against an opponent who could kill him off at any moment. Over and over again, Yang Kai was sent flying backwards into the river. Although he looked completely battered, his situation was slowly taking a turn for the better. Only about 30% of the space-time river behind him was left now. The moment he absorbed all of the river, he would be able to wield strength far beyond what he could before. As the intense fight had broken out between Yang Kai and Mo, the fight on the battlefield in the distant void was just as ferocious. The Black Ink clan army was too numerous, and the allied armies of the human race and the small stone race were beginning to show signs of defeat. If nothing changed, sooner or later, both armies would be completely wiped out. Once that happened, even the Ninth Order Masters could not be certain whether they could escape with their lives. Only the two giant spirit gods could most likely leave safely. This was not an outcome they could accept. Just as the battle reached its most pressing climax, a dazzling light shot out from the depths of the void. It was a familiar scene that renewed the human race masters' spirits as they knew who had come. As per Yang Kai's instructions, Zhong Ruo she rushed back to the battlefield. The moment she arrived, she turned into a bolt of light that weaved across the battlefield multiple times. The flowing light acted like a sharp blade that slaughtered countless Black Ink clan soldiers and wrecked the seemingly impenetrable formations they had set up. All at once, the humans and the small stone race were relieved of much of the pressure they had been under. Soon after that, Ruoshi headed over to RDA and R. The two giant spirit gods had proved to be invaluable allies to the humans, be it during the reoccupation of the No-Return Pass or the battle that broke out against the Black Ink Black Reinforcement Army. In both situations, the giant spirit gods had played pivotal roles. RDA and R were currently in a tough situation once again. They were surrounded and besieged by many royal lords and could not provide any help to the rest of the battlefield. Therefore, after relieving the pressure against the allied armies of the human race and the small stone race, Zhong Ruo she chose to aid the two giant spirit gods. As long as the two giant spirit gods were unencumbered, they would be able to draw the attention of a large number of masters from the Black Ink clan. The Black Ink clan would have to send even more royal lords over to keep these two occupied, thus relieving the pressure on the rest. Ruoshi alone was enough to rampage through enemy lines and leave the royal lords scared witless, let alone when she had formed a 9 palaces formation with her 8 personal guard. In the blink of an eye, the flash of light appeared beside R. The 8 small stone race masters scattered around to seal the surroundings, their battle formation encapsulating a large portion of the void. The royal lords who had been attacking R paled in response. They had learned the hard way just how terrifying this winged woman could be. Before the primordial heaven's source grand restriction had even broken, she had charged inside alone and exterminated all the masters who lingered at the opening, which included dozens of royal lords. Her actions back then terrified the masters inside the grand restriction, so much so that they were too afraid to make any rash moves. Many royal lords had remained hidden in the darkness. They had personally witnessed how powerful Zhong Ruoshi was and were afraid of her strength. This was the reason why the Black Ink clan army did not rush out the moment the grand restriction broke. They only gained the courage to leave the shelter of darkness when she rushed into the depths of the void to deal with the Supreme One. No one expected this woman to come charging back out on the battlefield at such a critical moment. Naturally, if Mi Jinglun could tell which way the battle was going, the royal lords could as well. The Black Ink clan army had the upper hand right now, and as long as no unexpected variables were introduced, the Black Ink clan would eventually be able to vanquish the humans and small stone race. When the time came, all of existence would belong to the Black Ink clan as the human race would be wiped out in totality. They were only a step away from their grand success, so how could the royal lords back down now? Thus, even though Zhong Ruoshi and her personal guard were wielding the might of their 9 palaces formation, a large number of masters from the Black Ink clan still fearlessly charged forward to stop them. Once again, the allied armies of the humans race and the small stone race were relieved of even more pressure. As the sword light of the Heaven's Order sword flashed, the part of the battlefield where Zhong Ruoshi was seemingly turned into an abyss of death. Be it territory lords or royal lords, none could escape from her or even put up a fight. Each time sword light flashed, numerous masters from the Black Ink clan perished. Their glory and dignity as masters was completely trampled on. Once someone reached a certain level of power, it became child's play for them to slaughter those in their path. In just a few moments, over 20 royal lords were killed. Who had been harassed by the royal lords all this time, was finally freed from those who had been keeping him pinned down. With a loud roar, he began attacking the nearby royal lords. However, before he could truly unleash his strength, a new group of royal lords rushed over. The Black Ink clan could tell that the allied armies no longer posed a threat to them, and they could use their advantage in numbers to keep them occupied. At this moment, the only ones who posed a threat to the Black Ink clan were Zhongruo and the two giant spirit gods. Thus, they had to stop these three no matter what, even if it cost them the lives of their royal lords. On this part of the battlefield, royal lords and territory lords fell like leaves from a tree in a howling storm. The black blood and black ink strength that escaped their corpses turned the void into a patch of darkness, which seemed to want to devour everything in its wake. Amidst it all, the sword light of the Heaven's Order sword shone brilliantly. Despite the show of force she was putting on, Zhongruo's original plan had actually been foiled. Initially, she wanted to save before working together with him to extricate Rda. Then, the three of them could charge out onto the main battlefield and rampage. Even though the Black Ink clan was massive in numbers, they would not be able to stop the three of them from slaughtering those in their path if they remained mobile. Given enough time and room to take action, these three powerful existences could massacre the entire Black Ink clan army on their own. However, the Black Ink clan promptly reacted to the situation and Zhongruo ended up being tied down to this part of the battlefield. Even whom she had only just rescued, was once again completely surrounded by royal lords and could no longer do much. Now that it had come to this, Zhongruo acted per the hand she was dealt. Since they wanted to impede her, they would have to pay an exorbitant price. Compared to her original plan, the present situation was actually even more beneficial for the human race army. The more the masters from the Black Ink clan focused on her, the less pressure the humans faced. In fact, if she managed to kill off enough royal lords, she would undoubtedly be helping the allied armies secure the final victory. Thus, Zhongruo was not upset by the Black Ink clan's actions. On the contrary, it suited her just fine. The royal lords came at her one after the other. They all turned into corpses under the Heaven's Order sword, but even so, none of those from the Black Ink clan showed any inclination to retreat. For both the human race and the Black Ink clan, this was the final battle that would decide their fate. They could not back down no matter what. This was a make-or-break battle that would determine who would go down in history as the ultimate victor. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5989, Zhongruo's Persistence. Marshall Peak, Zhongruo persistently swung her sword, and every swing of her sword brought about significant results. Ever since her return, no fewer than 300 royal lords had died at her hands in just 2 days. That was an extremely terrifying number. It had to be said that there were only a few dozen Ninth Order masters among the human race at present. The number of royal lords was many times more than the number of Ninth Order masters. Furthermore, the inheritance accumulated in the primordial heavens source grand restriction over millions of years could not be underestimated. Even though Zhongruo had slaughtered so many royal lords, many more royal lords were surrounding Zhongruo and the two giant spirit gods still. Zhongruo relentlessly slaughtered her enemies, and the movement of drawing her sword had almost become an instinctive reaction by now. The Black Ink clan had shifted the focus of the battle around her, which certainly resolved the crisis that had been looming over the human race army. At this moment, the allied armies of the human race and the small stone race finally regained their ability to hold their own against the Black Ink clan even though they continued to face some pressure on the main battlefield. The situation was no longer as hopeless as before, where their defeat had been imminent and there was no hope for victory. The black ink clouds condensed from the dissipated black ink strength had reached extreme concentration. Even the Ninth Order Masters felt apprehensive when they saw the dense black ink clouds that encompassed the huge void. Aside from Zhongruo and the two giant spirit gods, nobody could easily venture into the depths of the black ink clouds to fight against the Black Ink clan. Meanwhile, the immaculate white wings behind Zhongruo's back began to glow with a faint yellow and blue hue. The subtle change resembled an omen of something to come. At a certain moment, one of the royal lords fearlessly charged towards a Ninth Order small stone race master. He gathered all his strength in his fist and punched the personal guard with all his might. The personal guard staggered from the blow, then it immediately followed up with a violent counterattack that immediately killed the royal lord. Although the small stone race personal guard was equivalent to Ninth Order masters, these were currently joined in a 9 palaces formation with Zhongruoshi as its core. Any one of them could borrow the power of the battle formation at any time, so their current strength could no longer be judged by their mere cultivation alone. It could be said that Zhongruoshi and her 8 personal guards were one. The attacks unleashed by any party in the battle formation carried the culmination of their combined powers. Even if the royal lords were strong, they could not withstand such attacks, therefore, many royal lords had died at the hands of the personal guard over the last 2 days. The personal guard who slaughtered the royal lord earlier prepared to make its next move, but just as it raised its fist to attack, its hand shattered to dust. It was immediately followed by its arm, which then spread to its body. In the blink of an eye, the powerful personal guard was reduced to a pile of rubble. The surrounding royal lords and territory lords besieging it froze in surprise. When Zhongruoshi returned, her personal guard had all been covered in deep cracks. It was only natural for the surrounding royal lords and territory lords to notice such an obvious thing. They initially thought that the personal guards wouldn't last for long, which is why they targeted them while simultaneously attacking Zhongruoshi. It was not until they paid a horrendous price that they realized one thing. These personal guards might look like they were about to fall apart at any moment, but they remained capable of unleashing a despairing amount of power with every blow. That was until this moment. In the end, the personal guard could not withstand the pressure of the drawn-out battle and shattered to pieces. At the same time, the yellow and blue hue of the wings behind Zhongruoshi's back increased significantly when the personal guard crumbled to dust. Fortunately, Zhongruoshi seemed to have anticipated the situation and immediately switched the battle formation to the 8 trigrams formation. An increasingly violent barrage of attacks ensued. After the first personal guard shattered to pieces, the Black Ink clan suddenly saw hope in regard to their struggle to defeat Zhongruoshi. Their assault only became more and more aggressive as a result. Half a day later, the second personal guard shattered to pieces and the 8 trigrams formation subsequently changed to the 7 stars formation. Another half-day passed, and the third one broke apart. When Zhongruoshi led her personal guard against Mo, they sustained indelible damage during the battle. If there had been enough time, she would have allowed them to rest and recover. Unfortunately, they were in the middle of a large-scale battle. There was no time for them to even catch their breaths, much less recuperate from their wounds. They only managed to persist until now because the intensity of the current battle paled in comparison to her solo battle against Mo. Even so, her personal guard had finally reached their limits. One after another, they crumbled to pieces. Their destruction also signified that the battle formation was steadily weakening. As the battle formation weakened, the power they could exert was also considerably reduced. At the same time, the yellow and blue hue of the wings behind her back became extremely obvious. When the 6th personal guard shattered, Zhongruoshi forcefully changed the battle formation to the most basic 3 fortunes formation. At that moment, the Black Ink clan finally saw the light at the end of the tunnel. It would not take much longer to defeat her. A voice abruptly sounded in Zhongruoshi's mind, "Silly girl, you can't carry on in such a reckless manner. At this rate, you will soon struggle to maintain the balance between yin and yang. You will die if that happens." In the chaotic dead territory, Zhongruoshi spent 2,000 years harmonizing the power of yin and yang using her Heaven's Order bloodline. By doing so, her strength surged to unprecedented heights. She rapidly grew from an 8th Order master to a mighty existence who could fight against Mo alone. Nevertheless, she was still just a master at the peak of the 9th Order without the power she was granted by the burning light and serene glimmer. Previously, she had maintained a balance between the powers of yin and yang with her bloodline, and both Big Brother Huang and Big Sister Lan had remained sleeping deep within her body. However, they were beginning to regain consciousness as a result of her continuous fights and the deaths of her personal guard. That was not a good thing for her. The situation indicated that her bloodline was starting to have trouble maintaining a balance between the power of yin and yang. Just as Big Brother Huang said, if she were to lose control now, a master at the peak of the 9th Order like her would not be able to withstand the pressure of their rampaging power and would instantly perish. Zhongruo she remained silent. Forming the Three Fortunes formation with her 2 remaining personal guards, she persisted in her slaughter. At this moment, the number of Black Ink clansmen gathered around her had reduced significantly. Their numbers were far less than their initial numbers due to her desperate slaughter of her enemies. No matter how many there was bound to be a time when they were completely obliterated. At this juncture, the masters from the Black Ink clan were no longer as desperate as they were before though. Instead, they constantly wandered around her and forced her to expend her energy while keeping themselves safe from harm. They were evidently waiting for the destruction of her 2 remaining personal guards. Once she lost the support of the battle formation, the threat she posed towards the Black Ink clan would be greatly reduced. Realizing that, Big Brother Huang sighed and said no more. He knew that Zhongruo she couldn't stop fighting at this time. After all, this battle was related to the survival of the entire human race. The slightest wavering would lead to their eternal doom. There was only one thing he could do for her at this moment. He attempted to cooperate with Big Sister Lan, trying to coordinate the power of the yin and yang in her body and prevent the balance between their respective strengths from being broken. Unfortunately, what they could do was extremely limited. The situation gradually developed in the direction that the Black Ink clan were hoping for. When the 7th personal guard shattered to pieces, it became impossible for Zhongruo Shi to form a battle formation with just her last personal guard. The Black Ink clan had been waiting a long time for this very moment and they immediately swarmed forward and tore the last personal guard apart. In an instant, Zhongruo Shi sunk into the dire situation of fighting a solo battle. Meanwhile, RDA and RE were also being restrained by many masters from the Black Ink clan. They could not break free to help her. Death slowly approached her. Just as she was at her most vulnerable, something resembling a violent torrent suddenly tore through the dense layers of the Black Ink clan army and swiftly approached the battlefield where she was located. It was none other than the human race army that had been fighting fiercely this whole time. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5990, The Divine Spirits, Marshall Peak. When the human race army first departed from the no-return pass on their second crusade, there were over 20 million master. Unfortunately, their numbers had dwindled by more than half at this moment. What's more, their current numbers were only possible because the small stone race army had withstood the brunt of the pressure from their enemies. If not for the small stone race army, the human race army would have been defeated in battle long ago. Countless heroes fell on this vast battlefield. The severed limbs and dismembered corpses of the Black Ink clan littering the void were basically a manifestation of their military merits. The period when Zhongruo Shi had penetrated the depths of the void and fought with Mo had been the most difficult for the human race army. Countless Black Ink clansmen had besieged and intercepted the humans, leading to the deaths of many brave soldiers. Even the Ninth Order masters had suffered several casualties, with their deaths hitting morale particularly harshly. However, the pressure faced by the human race army decreased substantially when Zhongruo Shi returned with her battle formation of personal guard. She was the reason why so many masters from the Black Ink clan were killed. In such a fierce and chaotic battlefield, the slightest negligence could be fatal. Most of the human race masters on the battlefield were unaware of Zhongruo Shi's dire state. Be that as it may, how could Mi Jinglun, who had been keeping an eye on the overall situation on the battlefield, be oblivious to her circumstances? The Black Ink clan had shifted the focus of the battle to Zhongruo Shi. During this period, Mi Jinglun could only watch anxiously as the personal guard around her were destroyed one by one until she fell into a critical condition. Zhongruo Shi was undoubtedly one of the keys to winning this war. If she were defeated and killed, then the human race army would lose their only hope at victory. Therefore, she had to be protected no matter the cost. Even though that was the case, what strength did the human race army have to help her right now? Mi Jinglun racked his brains for an answer but could not think up a good plan. Recklessly charging forward with what remained of the human race army without a suitable plan would not help her. In fact, his actions would only place the humans in greater danger instead. At this moment, the human race army could borrow the strength of the small stone race army to offset the pressure from their enemies. However, that was only possible thanks to the cooperation between the human race army and the small stone race army. If they charged out, they would be separated from the small stone race army. Under such circumstances, the pressure that the humans would have to withstand on their own was unfathomable. At the critical moment, a blood-drenched Yang Xiao suddenly rushed towards Mi Jinglun, and after a brief conversation, the latter made up his mind. Under his command, the human race army instantly condensed their forces into an attack formation, broke through the Black Ink clan's heavy encirclement, and charged towards Zhongruo Shi like a violent storm. At this moment, many top masters from the Black Ink clan had been slaughtered by Zhongruo Shi, and out of those that remained, more than 100 royal lords were working together to restrain Rda and Re while nearly 200 surrounded Zhongruo Shi. Therefore, the human race army was not facing much pressure at the moment. It could even be said that the Black Ink clan no longer considered the human army a worthy opponent. As long as the royal lords defeated Zhongruo Shi, the humans would be helpless to resist when they finally turned around to deal with them. The Black Ink clan's underestimation was the reason the human race army successfully broke out of the encirclement. The strange movements of the human race army naturally caught the attention of many masters from the Black Ink clan. They might not know what the human race army was planning, but they had finally pushed Zhongruo Shi to the brink of desperation after sacrificing so many of their masters. How could they allow for any external interference at this time? Dozens of royal lords immediately turned around and charged towards the human race army while a massive number of Black Ink clan soldiers pursued the humans from the rear. Under these circumstances, the human race army would be facing enemies from the front and back if they did not quickly escape the besiegement of the royal lords. Only an extremely disastrous ending awaited them if they were engulfed by the enemy in their current state. When the royal lords took action, Zhongruo Shi also made her move. She attempted to slash her way through the heavy blockade and join the human race army. However, numerous masters from the Black Ink clan fearlessly threw themselves at her to obstruct her path. They did not seem to hesitate even though their lives were on the line. Hence, she was successfully prevented from escaping for some time. By this time, Zhongruo Shi was exhausted beyond her limits. After she departed from the chaotic dead territory, she rushed to the battlefield without delay. Once she arrived, she not only fought countless royal lords, but she also expended her strength to open the void corridor that connected to the chaotic dead territory. Afterwards, she delved into the depths of the opening in the primordial heavens source grand restriction and wreaked havoc there for some time before she engaged Mo in an intense battle. It could be said that she had not rested at all since she stepped foot on the battlefield. She had simply been moving from battle to battle without any breaks in between, therefore, she could only bring out 70% of her full strength. The most obvious change was her combat effectiveness. She used to be able to kill a royal lord in one blow, but now it took her multiple strikes to kill one. It would not be easy for her to join up with the human race army when she was being besieged by so many masters from all directions. At this moment, a figure abruptly soared into the sky. Raising both hands high, he clenched his fists and roared furiously, "Burn!" The two marks on his clenched fists flashed with a blinding light. 7 figures rushed into the sky behind him. Every one of them also had mysterious marks shining brightly on the backs of their hands. These marks indicated that these people were blessed by the sun's burning light and moon's serene glimmer. Yang Kai had brought these marks from the chaotic dead territory and bestowed them to 10 divine spirits many years ago. These divine spirits had been scattered throughout the various battlefields. Thanks to the great sun and moon marks in their possession, they could mobilize and transform the power of the yellow and blue crystals into purifying light. Consequently, they were essential to the logistical support of the human race army. It was precisely thanks to this method that the threat of the Black Ink strength to the human race was greatly reduced. The purifying Black Ink pills alone would not have been enough otherwise. Even before this incident, these divine spirits had been mobilizing the power of the great sun and moon marks constantly during the war. So many small stone race soldiers had died on the battlefield that they could easily summon a large burst of the purifying light without much effort. In this way, they could not only purify the battlefield, but they could also cause great damage to the Black Ink clan, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. When the human race army charged in Zhongruo Shi's direction, the divine spirits with the great sun and moon marks quickly activated the marks on the backs of their hands under Yang Xiao's leadership. Zhongruo Shi, who was besieged by countless royal lords, saw the scene from a distance and immediately understood their plan. A smile appeared on her exhausted face. Feeling the strength of the people around her, she knew she was not fighting alone. It was just that she had never even contemplated what they were about to attempt, much less tested it, so she did not know if she would succeed. Seniors, please assist me. Closing her eyes, she gripped the Heaven's Order sword tightly with both hands and pleaded. The sighs of Big Brother Huang and Big Sister Lan sounded in unison, but they did not refuse her. In the next moment, the wings behind Zhong Ruoshi's back glowed in two-colored light. When she opened her eyes, the color of her eyes had also changed. One eye was yellow and the other eye was blue. It was a strange sight to behold. At the same time, with Yang Xiao in the lead, the two marks on the backs of the hands of the divine spirits abruptly burst forth and transformed into a two-colored light that enveloped their bodies as a powerful divine sense simultaneously penetrated their knowledge seas. It was the divine senses of the burning light and serene glimmer. Under normal circumstances, they would never allow any external divine sense to encroach on their minds. However, they abandoned all defenses at this moment and allowed the divine sense to link with their own. One by one, the eyes of the divine spirits went blank as though they had lost themselves. Link. Zhong Ruoshi cried out. With herself as the source point, various rays of aura instantly connected with each other across the distance and became closely intertwined. Her aura, which had initially begun to dwindle, suddenly surged and shook the surrounding void. The royal lords paled at the sight. Success. Relief washed over Mi Jinglun at the sight. This was Yang Xiao's suggestion. When the 8 personal guards shattered to pieces, it became impossible for Zhong Ruoshi to form a battle formation. She would never escape from the besiegement of so many masters from the Black Ink clan in her current condition, so it was only a matter of time before she suffered a tragic death. The Black Ink clan would be free to attack the human race army once Zhong Ruoshi died, which would undoubtedly result in the human race's defeat. Be that as it may, the human race army had no extra resources to spare in their current condition. The very idea of helping Zhong Ruoshi was nothing more than a fool's dream unless somebody could form a new 9 palaces formation with her. Although they had enough Ninth Order masters to fulfill the requirements to form a 9 palaces formation, it was not easy for them to actually pull off such a feat even if 8 Ninth Order masters were sent to help Zhong Ruoshi. Even if they trusted her wholeheartedly, it would be impossible for them to join forces and form a 9 palaces formation in such a short time. After all, this was not solely a matter of trust but also of compatibility. That was why Yang Xiao had suggested attempting to form the 9 palaces formation with the divine spirits who owned the great sun and moon marks instead. He believed that they might achieve a pleasantly surprising result. The great sun and moon marks were derived from the burning light and serene glimmer's sources. Since Zhong Ruoshi had united the power of yin and yang with her bloodline, her body was brimming with the source strength of the burning light and serene glimmer. In other words, to her, Yang Xiao and the other divine spirits should not be that much different from her destroyed small stone race personal guard. At this point, their only option was to attempt this unprecedented feat. If they succeeded, then it would be a joyous success. If they failed, then there was nothing that could be done regardless. In any case, they would only know the result after they made the attempt. For that reason, Mi Jinglun ordered the entire human army to charge out and separate from the ranks of the small stone race army. It was their final desperate attempt to overturn their current predicament. If this plan failed, they would not only fail to rescue Zhong Ruoshi, but also face the imminent destruction of the human race army. Fortunately, the plan had worked. When the power of the 9 palaces formation enveloped the enormous void, Mi Jinglun smiled from the bottom of his heart. Dozens of royal lords were currently on the way to intercept the human race army and bombarded them with a storm of powerful secret techniques before they even arrived. The defenses of the human race army could be said to have fallen apart at this moment, with only the Ninth Order masters being capable of blocking such an onslaught. Just as the Ninth Order masters were confronting the royal lords though, the hollow-eyed divine spirits charged forward with Yang Xiao in the lead. Every one of these divine spirits was enveloped in a blue and yellow light, and the aura surrounding them was so strong that the void shuddered in their presence. Yang Xiao headed straight towards one of the royal lords, and under that royal lord's astonished gaze, Yang Xiao slammed his fist forward. Half of the royal lord's body instantly exploded into mist when the punch landed. Meanwhile, Yang Xiao did not stop his movements and charged towards the second royal lord with a blank expression on his face. Yang Xiao was an ancient dragon, equivalent to a peak 8th order master. Naturally, killing a royal lord in one blow was the result of the battle formation and not his own strength. It was a pity that the attack cost him a heavy price. The arm he used to punch the royal lord became twisted and broke, with blood pouring out of it from multiple wounds. Most of the divine spirits displayed similar performances. With no leader coordinating their movements, the royal lords blocking the divine spirits were swiftly cut down without much resistance. The remaining royal lords were frightened and quickly moved aside to open up a path. Such a feat was only possible because Yang Xiao and the others were divine spirits. The physical body of each divine spirit was extremely powerful in comparison to any other existence. If they were ordinary 8th order human masters who had supported Zhong Ruoxi in this battle formation instead, their bodies would not have been able to withstand the backlash from launching such powerful attacks. Martial Peak. Martial Peak, Chapter 5991, Reappearance of the Nine Palaces Formation, Martial Peak. The 8 divine spirits broke through the heavy blockade of the royal lords and headed straight towards Zhong Ruoxi, who did not remain idle either. At this moment, she released a powerful burst of energy and tore through the besiegement of the royal lords to join the divine spirits as soon as possible. With the power of the new Nine Palaces Formation, the original crisis that loomed over her was resolved in an instant. When Zhong Ruoxi united with the 8 divine spirits, a huge change took place in the overall situation. The human race army escorting the divine spirits did not stop forging ahead and instead acted like a raging current that swept across the void in a wide arc before returning to their original battlefield via a huge detour. With tremendous help from the small stone race army, the two armies reunited once more and resumed their endless battle against the Black Ink clan army. At this point, Pyongyang Pass was completely destroyed and the suppressing Black Ink fortress had been shattered. Most of the warships were also gone with just a few barely surviving. The human race no longer had many external aids to rely upon at this last juncture of the war. The only thing they had left was the barrier of flesh and blood. In the void, Zhong Ruoxi had united with the 8 divine spirits. She gripped the Heaven's Order sword tightly with both hands, surrounded by many royal lords in all directions. She murmured softly under her breath, "We won't have much time." The strength of the 8 divine spirits could not compare with her personal guard, so not only would forcefully forming a battle formation cause immense damage to the bodies of the divine spirits, but even the powerful divine sense of the burning light and serene glimmer which directed their auras caused hidden dangers. If Zhong Ruoxi could not end the battle as soon as possible, the divine spirits who joined up with her would eventually explode. Even if their physical bodies somehow managed to endure, their souls might be extinguished. What's more, Yang Xiao and Su Yang were among the 8 divine spirits. These two were Yang Kai's important family members. She could not lose this fight. Even setting aside the weakness of the divine spirits, Zhong Ruoxi could hardly last for much longer. At this very moment, she was burning the Heaven's Order bloodline in her body just to forcefully maintain a balance between the power of yin and yang, despite Big Brother Huang and Big Sister Lan doing everything they could to assist her. It would not be long before the balance would be broken and her bloodline was burned out entirely. Forcing down her worries, Zhong Ruoxi lifted her sword and boldly charged towards her enemies, followed closely by the 8 divine spirit. The sudden burst of power left the royal lords scrambling in a panic. One after another, the royal lords fell prey to Zhong Ruoxi's sword, but when she finally broke through the encirclement, she did not escape. On the contrary, she turned around and led the divine spirits to attack once more. Thanks to the 9 Palaces formation which was formed with Zhong Ruoxi as the core and the 8 divine spirits as the foundation, she had once more become an unstoppable blade that repeatedly swept across the battlefield. Every charge resulted in the deaths of many royal lords. 10, 20, 30, 50. Zhong Ruoxi's vision went blurry, and she could not see the scenery in front of her clearly. Furthermore, the power of yin and yang in her body was faintly showing signs of imbalance. Even so, she did not stop. She had no choice but to charge forward and swing her sword. Meanwhile, the 8 divine spirits following behind her were covered in blood, After all, the Nine Palaces formation placed an extremely heavy burden on their bodies. The only reason they could maintain the formation at all was because the divine spirits had relinquished all control over their own bodies and fully surrendered themselves to become part of the battle formation. By doing so, even with their bodies on the verge of collapse, they managed to persist. The bones in Yang Xiao's arms had been shattered to pieces. Meanwhile, Su Yang's internal organs were crushed. She was also bleeding from her 7 orifices, which made her appearance extremely ghastly. After fighting for some time, Zhongruo she suddenly felt a change in the battle formation. One pillar of the foundation had failed, thus, she hastily readjusted the battle formation. The 9 Palaces formation became the 8 trigrams formation. Unable to withstand the pressure of the battle formation any longer, one of the divine spirits fighting behind her had exploded and died. The death distressed her greatly, causing a sharp stab of pain in her heart. Nevertheless, she did not dare to check the identity of the deceased divine spirit. She could only persist and swing her sword to cut down her enemies. At a certain point, Zhongruo she could no longer detect any royal lords around her. She looked around with bleary eyes, but no matter where she looked, she could find none of the masters who had previously besieged her. She had cut down all 200 royal lords. When the realization struck her, she nearly burst into tears. Her entire body was covered in countless wounds, and the fresh blood that drenched her entire body had dyed what was left of her robe scarlet. She had not been too concerned when she teamed up with her personal guard to form the battle formation. After all, her personal guard each had the strength of a 9th Order master. Not to mention, their bodies were robust. They were capable of withstanding the pressure of the battle formation for an extended time. However, there were too many things to worry about when she entered a battle formation with the divine spirits. There were times when she could not dodge the attacks from the royal lords, so she was forced to bear the brunt of these attacks or the divine spirits would be killed instead. In this way, she had taken more damage in this shot battle than in all her previous fights. It was not until this moment that she had the time to check on the condition of the divine spirits. 8 divine spirits had forced their way through the enemy blockade to help her, but only 3 remained behind her. Even so, the aura of these 3 was weak and unstable, like they could be snuffed out at any moment. Although she was heartbroken by the losses, Zhongruo she was relieved to see that Yang Xiao and Su Yang had survived. The Dragon Clan and Phoenix Clan were certainly worthy of being the strongest among the divine spirits. Besides, both Yang Xiao and Su Yang had been at the peak of their cultivation for a long time, which was another reason why they managed to persist until the end. Seniors, please release the battle formation, Zhongruo she anxiously urged. Big brother Huang and big sister Lan immediately released control over their source strength at the same time. In the next moment, the 3 hollow-eyed divine spirits regained consciousness. 3 muffled groans of pain sounded in unison. They had not been aware of their states when their consciousness had been taken over, but a wave of boundless agony washed over them when their consciousness was restored. All the bones in Yang Xiao's body made cracking sounds as he revealed his true form without hesitation. Changing into his dragon form would give him greater endurance against his wounds. The injuries might be fatal to his human form, but the same degree of injuries would only be considered critical in his dragon form. Still, his 90,000-meter-long ancient dragon form was tattered and covered in terrible wounds. Moreover, the aura around him was weak and unstable. Similarly, the other divine spirit revealed his true form. He was a Pai Xiu who had survived for innumerable years and was thus an old veteran with an incredibly solid foundation. Neither of these 2 suffered from major problems. Although they were very heavily wounded, their lives were not in danger. Then, Zhongruo she turned to look at Su Yang, and her eyes immediately widened in horror at the sight. Su Yang's body was breaking apart and crumbling into dust. Like Yang Kai, she was originally part of the human race and only became part divine spirit after obtaining her phoenix source. She had repeatedly entered the phoenix nest to cultivate over the years, and in the end, she completely integrated the 3rd-generation Phoenix Empress source to become a pureblood member of the Phoenix clan. Be that as it may, her foundation and physique were still inferior compared to someone born and raised in the Phoenix clan. Yang Xiao and Pai Xiu just barely survived the ordeal, but Su Yang failed to pull through until the end. Yang Xiao evidently noticed Su Yang's condition because he released a sorrowful wail at the sight. Su Yang, who was covered in various wounds, looked down at her hands which were beginning to disintegrate into ash. A look of remembrance flashed through her eyes at the sight. Raising her head once more, she looked at the weeping Zhong Ruoxi and smiled. Please don't blame yourself. The Phoenix clan has our phoenix flame. There might be a chance for me to revive from death. But, if I fail, please pass a message to him for me. Tell him that meeting him was the greatest blessing in my life. Zhong Ruoxi nodded desperately, her tears streaming down her face uncontrollably. The Phoenix clan's phoenix flame was also known as the Flame of Rebirth. It was only natural for Su Yang and Zhong Ruoxi to know about such things. Unfortunately, the Flame of Rebirth did not always succeed. It was simply a possibility of rebirth. After all, the Phoenix clan would be truly immortal if their rebirth succeeded in every attempt. If the Flame of Rebirth failed, their Phoenix source would return to the Phoenix nest and be reborn as a new member of the Phoenix clan. Martial Peak. Martial Peak, Chapter 5992, The Hope of the Divine Spirits, Martial Peak. After the battle, Zhong Ruoxi's crisis was resolved. Unfortunately, the price of her rescue was not small. 5 out of the 8 divine spirits who came to help her had lost their lives in battle. Only 3 of them had survived to the end. Be that as it may, Su Yang had already set one foot across the gates of death. After Su Yang finished speaking to Zhong Ruoxi, her entire body dissolved into tiny points of fluorescent light, which did not dissipate into the void but condensed into a dim blue flame instead. It was her phoenix flame, as well as her phoenix source. It was the inheritance she received from the 3rd-generation Phoenix Empress, who lived back in the late ancient era. Zhong Ruoxi anxiously stared at the small ball of fire. The phoenix flame flickered, going from light to dark. In just a short moment, the dim blue phoenix flame became dim and dull, as though it would be extinguished in the next moment. Despite facing hundreds of royal lords without the slightest change in her expression, Zhong Ruoxi now was as pale as a sheet. Moreover, her body was enveloped in a layer of boundless chill. The extinguishment of the phoenix flame would mean that Su Yang was gone forever. Even if the phoenix flame returned to the phoenix nest and produced another member of the Phoenix clan, that person would no longer be Su Yang. Hey. Big Brother Huang's voice abruptly sounded in Zhong Ruoxi's mind, causing her to snap back to her senses. Grab that ball of fire, Big Brother Huang urgently urged. Although Zhong Ruoxi did not know what Big Brother Huang was planning, she quickly did as she was told. She stepped forward and wrapped her hands around the weakened flame. In the next moment, she clearly sensed Big Brother Huang and Big Sister Lan pouring power from their sources into the phoenix flame. She immediately understood their plan and hurriedly activated her Heaven's Order bloodline to help balance the flow and harmonize their power. The flame that was on the verge of being snuffed out slowly stabilized. In addition, faint hues of yellow and blue gradually seeped into the flame. The hues of yellow and blue were none other than the source strength of the burning light and serene glimmer. Shortly after the primordial light left its birthplace, the power of yin and yang were split from it. The primordial light later collided with the divine spirit ancestral land, and the dissipated energy transformed into the various divine spirits. In the end, its remaining essence turned into a woman bearing the Heaven's Order bloodline. Strictly speaking, the burning light and the serene glimmer originated from the same source as all divine spirits. Although they could be classified as divine spirits, they were different from ordinary divine spirits. That was because they were the first to split from the primordial light. Be it in terms of the purity or strength of their source, ordinary divine spirits were simply incomparable to the burning light and serene glimmer. Even the dragons and phoenixes were no exception in this regard. Therefore, the pure source strength of the burning light and serene glimmer was a great supplement to the divine spirits. Their source strength could help in the refinement of a divine spirit source and enhance the bloodline of these divine spirits. Yang Kai was the best example of this. When Yang Kai first met Big Brother Huang and Big Sister Lan, he had only just become a 10,000-meter-long grand dragon, but after receiving a gift of source strength from the two of them, his dragon vein improved at an astonishing pace, allowing him to grow to 20,000 meters in just half a month. What's more, the gift of source strength from Big Brother Huang and Big Sister Lan was nowhere near exhausted and had helped Yang Kai several more times over the years, eventually allowing him to become an ancient dragon less than 1,000 years later. This rate of growth for a member of the dragon clan was unheard of in history. At this moment, the same effect took place when they injected their source strength into the phoenix flame. The phoenix flame reacted as though it suddenly received significant nourishment and began burning brighter and stronger until the small ball of flame gradually resembled a blue-colored great Sunday. Zhong Ruo, she watched the flame intently. Then, she vaguely noticed the figure of a phoenix clan member flying about within the flames. When the burning brightness of the phoenix flame reached a certain point, the blue-colored great sun abruptly expanded and exploded. The sudden turn of events left her dumbfounded. She couldn't help thinking that something extremely awful had happened. However, she immediately revealed an expression of joyous surprise. That was because a clear and striking phoenix cry resounded throughout the void when the blue phoenix flame erupted. It was followed by the unfurling of a giant pair of dazzling wings, then the gradual appearance of a beautiful and graceful figure. Having received help from the source strength of Big Brother Huang and Big Sister Lan, Su Yang had succeeded in her rebirth. Zhong Ruo, she wept tears of joy. A phoenix's rebirth generally came with great risks. If they failed, they would lose their life on the spot. On the other hand, they would receive immense benefits if they succeeded. That was because the strength of the Phoenix clan members would improve significantly with each rebirth. Not to mention, Su Yang received aid from the source strength of the burning light and serene glimmer during her rebirth. At this moment, her ice phoenix aura radiating from the flame of rebirth was at a height that Su Yang had never been able to achieve in the past. She would not lose even if compared to divine dragon Fu Guang. She was now a divine spirit that was on par with a veteran Ninth Order master. While the divine spirit's population was far from their peak back in the primordial era, there was no small number of them nowadays. Nevertheless, Fu Guang was the only living divine spirit who had achieved such a level of power. Naturally, Yang Kai could also be included in this list. The rest of the divine spirits were at most equivalent to peak 8th Order masters. Although these divine spirits were generally stronger than average human race masters at the peak of the 8th Order open heaven realm, that did not change the fact that they had yet to reach the highest peak of their strength. Therefore, the Phoenix clan no longer had a designated leader, much less a Phoenix Empress after the death of the former Dragon and Phoenix clan leaders during the battle in the Barren Territory. Only a Phoenix who had reached the realm of Ninth Order Masters had the right to command the Phoenix clan and vie for the position of Phoenix Empress. Su Yang had reached the peak of the 8th Order Open Heaven realm. In addition, her Phoenix clan source had reached a realm equivalent to the 8th Order. Having inherited the source of the third-generation Phoenix Empress, she was expected to become a Phoenix Empress in the future if she had enough time to develop and grow. The entire Phoenix clan had placed their hopes in her. Nevertheless, the enhancement of a divine spirit's bloodline and source was extremely difficult. Even though Su Yang repeatedly entered the Phoenix nest to cultivate over the years, she had remained stuck at a bottleneck. She simply could not overcome the bottleneck and advance to the final step. That was until this moment. Su Yang, who was reborn thanks to the flame of rebirth, had finally shattered her bottleneck. Her bloodline had improved significantly, allowing her to advance. She even overcame the shackles of the open heaven realm, which was nothing short of a miracle. Amidst the ringing notes of the phoenix cries, Su Yang, who had transformed into an ice phoenix, gave Zhong Ruo a slight nod of acknowledgement. Then, she turned around and charged towards the vast battlefield, leaving a long and flickering tail of blue light in her wake. Another phoenix cry sounded a moment later, and a large part of the void froze as a result. Countless black ink clansmen were turned into ice sculptures that maintained their final appearance before their deaths, drifting aimlessly in the void. Even the surviving royal lords were too intimidated by the icy aura to step forward and challenge this new enemy. They were certain that things would not end well for them if they were touched by that kind of power. At the same time, the enormous black ink cloud that had condensed above the battlefield was also enveloped in huge ice crystals. One after another, phoenix cries sounded from various directions across the battlefield. It was the Phoenix clan welcoming their newly crowned empress. Their sonorous cries pierced through space itself, sounding a horn of counterattack. Who? A high-pitched dragon roar sounded next. Zhong Ruoxi, who finally managed to collect her emotions, looked up into the void and saw Yang Xiao writhing around in his dragon form. The power of the dragon vein in his body fluctuated wildly, showing faint signs that he was about to break through. Moreover, he was not the only one. Pai Xiu, the final survivor, was also exhibiting similar signs. The previous battle was an arduous struggle that they had never experienced before. Although their consciousnesses had been dormant at the time, their bodies did not forget the details of the battle. The enormous pressure had brought them closer to the limits of their bloodline. Nonetheless, what truly allowed them to break through their limits was the pure source strength of the burning light and serene glimmer which had poured into them. Both Yang Xiao and Pai Xiu were bearers of the great sun and moon marks, which were the manifestation of a piece of the burning light and serene glimmer's source. In order to successfully form the 9 Palaces formation with Zhong Ruoxi, Big Brother Huang and Big Sister Lan had integrated their marks into the divine spirits and assumed control over their bodies. Hence, all 8 of the divine spirits received the blessing of the burning light and the serene glimmer's source strength, which stimulated the growth of their bloodline greatly. The benefits that they obtained after surviving their near-death experience were unimaginable. The power of Yang Xiao's dragon vein boiled. He roared endlessly, filled with the faint realization that he had touched up the barrier that hindered his growth. As long as he could break through this barrier, he would be able to successfully become a divine dragon. He had been under tremendous mental pressure ever since he returned from the universe furnace. Although Yang Shui had advanced to the 9th order, he remained stuck as an ancient dragon. Consequently, there were many occasions in which they could no longer fight side by side with each other. The main reason was the difference in their strengths, which caused him to become a burden for Yang Shui. For this reason, Yang Xiao had been desperately trying to improve his bloodline. He had asked Fu Guang for advice on countless occasions, but the path to becoming a divine dragon was not easy. Even with Fu Guang's careful guidance, he simply could not find a way to overcome his bottleneck. The number of people in each generation of the dragon clan who could successfully advance to become divine dragons could always be counted on one hand. Most of the time, the dragon clan had only one divine dragon, and even at the peak of the dragon clan, there had only been a total of 3 divine dragons. At this moment, Yang Xiao could almost see his breakthrough on the horizon. He knew that this might be his opportunity to overcome his bottleneck, therefore, he could not afford to miss it. In order to break through the shackles of his bloodline, he was willing to sacrifice everything. The same was true for Pai Xiu. While the dragon and phoenix clans generally had the protection of a dragon emperor or a phoenix empress in each generation, no equivalent divine spirit had appeared among the rest of the divine spirits since the end of the primordial era. The primordial era had been the turning point for the divine spirits, who lost the blessings of the heavens and earned the malice of the universe instead. During the primordial era, the divine spirits had been the favored of the heavens. They were unrestrained in their actions, doing whatever they wanted without any fear or scruples. Their reign came to an end after countless years of warring against each other for dominance, and they were eventually supplanted by the monster race. By that point, countless divine spirits had perished. Afterwards, the blessing and favor of the heavens gradually shifted to the monster race. Innumerable divine spirits were again wiped out during the early ancient era when the monster race ruled, and the number of divine spirits who survived was less than 1% of their numbers at their peak. If the monster race had continued to reign over the universe, the divine spirits would have gone extinct completely. Even the dragon and phoenix clans would not be an exception. What happened next was amusing indeed. The monster race ultimately walked down the same path as the divine spirits after they overthrew the reign of the divine spirits. Once again, the blessing and favor of the heavens shifted, now falling upon the human race. It was for that reason that the divine spirits cooperated with the human race. By taking shelter under the wings of the human race, they managed to preserve the lives of the surviving divine spirits until today. In short, the divine spirits lost the favor of the heavens after the primordial era and could no longer reproduce the glory of their ancestors. The greatest sign of their decline was the huge reduction in the number of divine spirits that could touch what was equivalent to the 9th order open heaven realm. Only those born in the Dragon Clan and Phoenix Clan had produced such masters after the primordial era. It had to be said that every single Divine Spirit clan had the protection of their respective Ninth-Order Divine Spirits during the primordial era. In fact, their numbers could range from a few to several dozen in each Divine Spirit clan back then. Countless eons had passed since then, and at this moment, there was a Pai Xiu who finally experienced the opportunity to overcome the shackles of his bloodline on this vast battlefield. He was ecstatic beyond imagination. Forcefully enduring the damage caused by his injuries, he pushed his bloodline power with reckless abandon. The vitality surrounding his body became more and more intense as time passed. All over the battlefield, the divine spirits revealed their true bodies and roared in excitement. If Su Yang's transformation was a joyous event for the Phoenix Clan, then Pai Xiu's current state was a joyous event for all the divine spirits. Regardless of whether he succeeded in overcoming his bottleneck or not, he had already given the other divine spirits a glimpse of hope. Martial Peak. Martial Peak, Chapter 5993, The Mighty Current of the Dragon Pool, Martial Peak. On the main battlefield, the difficult situation faced by the Allied army had been greatly eased, all thanks to Zhong Ruoxi. The Black Ink clan had paid an exorbitant price to take down Zhong Ruoxi, resulting in the loss of hundreds of royal lords and yielding less than desirable results. If the human race army had not desperately escorted the 8 divine spirits to aid her at the last moment, the Black Ink clan's plans to kill Zhong Ruoxi would most likely have succeeded, and once she was dead, there would no longer be anybody on the battlefield with sufficient strength to pose a threat to the Black Ink clan. At that moment, the 2 giant spirit gods were trapped by over 100 royal lords. They were too busy fending for themselves to spare any energy to rescue the human race army. Fortunately, Zhong Ruoxi eventually won the battle. The price of her victory was the lives of 5 divine spirits, but all the royal lords surrounding and besieging her had been eliminated in exchange. Furthermore, Su Yang had successfully been crowned as the Phoenix Empress. The enormous figure of the Ice Phoenix radiated with a bone-chilling cold that froze everything in its wake. Even space itself was no exception. Be that as it may, the situation remained bleak. The Black Ink clan had twice as many troops as the Allied army, which gave them a numerical advantage that was difficult to overcome. Furthermore, not all of the royal lords had been eliminated in the skirmish with Zhong Ruoxi. The enemy had preserved enough royal lords to maintain the situation on the main battlefield despite their attempt to kill Zhong Ruoxi. At this moment, the difference in strength between the two sides had not shrunk, but instead increased significantly. The main cause for this was that the small stone race died at a much faster rate than the Black Ink clan. Su Yang's rebirth had only managed to help stabilize the situation by a small margin. The human race army would need an even greater injection of strength to prevent things from deteriorating, much less win the battle. A continuous wave of dragon roars reverberated throughout the void. When the power of Yang Xiao's dragon vein reached a certain limit, the aura of the divine dragon erupted. Then, the body of a 100,000-meter-long white dragon emerged, its enormous dragon head rising high above, overlooking all living creatures from a lofty height. Yang Xiao had succeeded in ascending to the realm of divine dragon. At the same time, the aura of a ninth-order divine spirit radiated from Pai Xiu. 8 divine spirits had stepped forward to help Zhong Ruoxi, and though 5 had died in battle, the remaining 3 had successfully overcome their respective shackles and risen to greater heights. It was important to note that the difference in impact a ninth-order divine spirit like Pai Xiu could play on the battlefield compared to a newly advanced ninth-order human master was enormous. That was because the divine spirits were inherently stronger than ninth-order humans by a large margin. As soon as Yang Xiao and Pai Xiu joined forces and charged into the battlefield, a large swath was cut into the ranks of the Black Ink clan army. The overwhelming aura of the divine spirits flooded the void, causing countless Black Ink clan soldiers to perish. In the distant void, another silver divine dragon was rampaging across the battlefield. His entire body was drenched in blood, and many of his tough dragon scales had been torn or blasted off. This silver divine dragon was none other than Fu Guang. Regardless of his immense strength, he was bound to sustain injuries in such a chaotic and intense battlefield. When Fu Guang saw Yang Xiao charging into the battlefield after becoming a divine dragon, he immediately rushed over towards him. At the same time, a series of dragon roars were exchanged between them, as though they were communicating with each other. It did not take long before Yang Xiao seemed to understand the situation, and he quickly sliced a bloody path through his enemies to approach Fu Guang. A short while later, the two divine dragons gathered at the same place. In terms of size alone, Fu Guang was undoubtedly larger than Yang Xiao. This was only natural as Fu Guang had been a divine dragon for a much longer time. The two behemoths began to draw upon the power of their dragon veins, causing their vitality to surge and boil within them. That was not all. They also began to spin in circles at a high speed, with their bodies connected together from end to end. In the beginning, their figures could still be seen, however, they soon blurred into a rapidly rotating blur. Something could vaguely be seen amidst the rapidly spinning circle of light, as though being summoned into existence. Many of the royal lords in the Black Ink clan army couldn't help feeling uncomfortable at the sight. Although they did not know what the two divine dragons were attempting, they knew that their actions would undoubtedly be detrimental to the Black Ink clan. They had to stop the divine dragons at all costs, hence, more than a dozen royal lords immediately rushed towards the two divine dragons from various directions. Despite their efforts though, another shocking scene entered their eyes before they could approach the divine dragons. Under the joint efforts of the two divine dragons, a large amount of turbid liquid suddenly gushed out from the dazzling circle of light. The unknown liquid splattered across the void like a spray of mist from a mountain spring, covering everything around them. Then, a torrent of water emerged and swept out in all directions. Many of the divine spirits who knew what was happening couldn't help feeling moved by the scene before them. They knew that the Dragon Clan had brought out their strongest trump card in order to obtain victory in this war. The torrent gushing into the void without restraint was clearly the waters from the Dragon Pool. The Phoenix Clan had the Phoenix Nest, while the Dragon Clan had the Dragon Pool. These were the foundations of their respective clans. When the Phoenix Clan mobilized the power of the Phoenix Nest against their enemies, the Dragon Clan had not unleashed the power of the Dragon Pool. It was not that the Dragon Clan did not want to bring out their trump card, but rather that they lacked the ability to perform such a feat under normal circumstances. The act of summoning the Dragon Pool would have required various complicated rituals in addition to the concerted efforts of many Dragon Clan members. Unfortunately, the Dragon Clan simply could not afford the time and energy to perform such intricate rites on such a crisis-ridden battlefield. That was the case until Yang Xiao became a divine dragon. With Fu Guang's cooperation, the two divine dragons joined hands and forcibly summoned the Dragon Pool to the battlefield. The Dragon Pool was the foundation of the Dragon Clan. After all, the existence of the Dragon Pool was the prerequisite for the Dragon Clan to produce endless descendants. Not to mention, the power of the Dragon Pool was diligently accumulated over countless generations of the Dragon Clan. Regardless of whether the war would end in victory or defeat today, the Dragon Clan would inevitably suffer unimaginable losses by summoning the Dragon Pool on such a chaotic battlefield. It would be impossible to restore the lost energy without several hundreds of thousands of years of recuperation. Nevertheless, there was no denying that the effects of summoning the Dragon Pool were remarkable. The waters of the Dragon Pool turned into a raging torrent that swept out in all directions, and the Black Ink clan soldiers caught within this flood instantly perished. The power of the Dragon Pool was an unstoppable force. If a dragon bearing the Dragon Clan bloodline came into contact with the Dragon Pool's waters, they would be able to enhance their bloodline and increase their strength. On the contrary, the waters of the Dragon Pool were a lethal poison to living creatures without the power of a dragon vein in their bodies. Everywhere the mighty current flowed, death followed. Even one of the royal lords rushing towards the two divine dragons who accidentally got caught in the current only managed to struggle for a few breaths before he dissolved into the rampaging waters. It was a grand display of the terrifying power within the mighty current of the Dragon Pool. Needless to say, the current did not pose any threat to beings like the royal lords and the territory lords as long as they remained on guard. The power emanating from the Dragon Pool might be impressive, but powerful masters only needed to avoid the waters by a certain margin to remain unaffected. However, It was never Fu Guang's intention to target the enemy masters when he joined forces with Yang Xiao to summon the dragon pool. His goal had always been the Black Ink clan army. The royal lords and the territory lords could easily dodge the raging currents, but the Black Ink clan soldiers weaker than the territory lords were not so capable. Therefore, the troops of the Black Ink clan army were now perishing in droves. Some small stone race members fighting the Black Ink clan army were also caught in the raging torrent, but this couldn't be helped. Although Fu Guang had done his best to summon the dragon pool in an area where only the Black Ink clan was heavily concentrated, he could not exert fine control over the direction in which the mighty current of the dragon pool would flow, hence, accidental injuries among friendly troops was inevitable. What shocked him though was that the small stone race members caught in the raging torrent of the dragon pool did not lose their lives. On the contrary, they simply struggled in the current for some time before they quickly rushed out and resumed fighting. After pondering on it for a moment though, Fu Guang realized what had happened. These small stone race soldiers might be simple-minded, but their bodies contained a significant amount of power from the burning light and serene glimmer. Even if the power of the dragon pool was both ancient and pure, it was still incomparable to the original powers of yin and yang born alongside the universe. The realization completely relieved Fu Guang of his worries. With hindsight, he had to admit that summoning the dragon pool at such a perilous juncture had been a stroke of genius. Following the raging torrent that swept out in all directions, the Black Ink clan army suffered enormous losses, completely eliminating the numerical advantage they originally held. On the other hand, the human race army was small in number and extremely agile in their movements, hence, it was not difficult for them to avoid the mighty current under Mi Jinglun's command. As for the small stone race, only their formations were scattered by the impact while they did not suffer any actual casualties. After a while, the dragon pool vanished without a trace. The release of the waters that the dragon pool had accumulated over countless eons instantly changed the entire situation on the battlefield. It was finally time for a counterattack of the allied army of the human and the small stone races. Among the remaining Black Ink clan army, all the royal lords wore solemn expressions on their faces. They simply could not understand this sudden turn of events. How did the Black Ink clan, who should have had an absolute numerical advantage, end up in such dire condition all of a sudden? Without sufficient numerical advantage, it was impossible for the Black Ink clan to be a match for the allied army of the human race and the small stone race. To make matters worse, that terrifying woman was also beginning to take action again. After the three divine spirits advanced to the Ninth Order in quick succession, they immediately charged into the battlefield to resolve the most critical crises. Zhong Ruo, she finally had the chance to catch her breath as a result. She had watched the entire chain of events unfolding before her, beginning with the dragon pool summoning, the raging current sweeping out across the battlefield, and finally, the Black Ink clan soldiers being washed away and vanishing from existence. Tightening her grip around the Heaven's Order sword, she murmured under her breath, "Seniors, I'm heading into battle." Big Brother Huang sighed softly, like he wanted to make a comment, but in the end, he said nothing and silently cooperated with Big Sister Lan to help Zhong Ruo she maintain the balance of power in her body. The Heaven's Order bloodline burned once more, and the wings behind Zhong Ruo she's back glowed with a blue and yellow hue. She charged into the battlefield without hesitation, aiming directly at the royal lords besieging Rda and Ra. At this moment, the pressure faced by the allied army on the main battlefield was not that serious. In fact, they were beginning to gain the upper hand. That was why Zhong Ruo she did not head for the main battlefield. She would not last much longer in battle, so there was no point in slaughtering some miscellaneous Black Ink clan troops with what little time she had left. It was undoubtedly more cost-efficient to spend her limited strength slaughtering some royal lords instead. Besides, Rda and Ra would be freed as long as she killed enough royal lords. The allied army of the human race and the small stone race would also receive the support of the two giant spirit gods if she succeeded, which might be more effective than providing support by herself. In a flash of yellow and blue, Zhong Ruo she entered the range of the battle where Rda and Ra were located. At this moment, the royal lords besieging the two giant spirit gods were forced to suffer in silence. The royal lords besieging Zhong Ruo she had been completely eradicated, and the numerical advantage of the Black Ink clan army on the main battlefield was quickly being overturned. At this point, The human race army had gained the upper hand in this battle. Even if the royal lords fighting the two giant spirit gods wanted to help their comrades, they did not dare to leave their positions easily. They were only able to keep the two giant spirit gods in check by relying on sufficient numbers to harass them. If any of them stepped away from their position, there was a risk that the delicate balance would be broken. Once the two giant spirit gods broke free of their restraints, it would be impossible to pin them down again. However, it was evident that Zhongruo was coming to help the two giant spirit gods. The royal lords would only be waiting for their imminent deaths if they continued to confront the two giant spirit gods, but showing their backs to these three terrifying enemies would likely just result in them dying faster. At this point, they were stuck in a situation with no hope of escape. Any choice they made would result in a tragic end, thus, every one of them felt aggrieved and hopeless. Martial Peak. Martial Peak, Chapter 5994, Final Burst of Strength, Martial Peak. The Black Ink clan's plans to use the royal lords to keep the two giant spirit gods under control failed as soon as Zhongruo came to the latter's aid. With a flash of her sword, several royal lords perished on the spot. Upon receiving Zhongruo's assistance, immediately struck out at the same time. He reached out his hand and smacked at a royal lord who was hovering around him. Thanks to Er's heaven-destroying, earth-shattering strength, the royal lord struck by his blow was instantly smashed to pieces. However, paid a heavy price for his actions. The other royal lords immediately took the opportunity to leave numerous wounds on his body, causing blood and flesh to splatter everywhere. Nevertheless, did not back down. Abandoning all defenses, he switched to a violent offensive instead. As time passed, the royal lords steadily perished. When the number of royal lords besieging dropped to half their original number, the restraints and shackles holding him down could no longer be sustained. Was freed. Afterwards, his offensive became increasingly violent and vicious. He worked together with Zhongruo to quickly slaughter a few more royal lords around him, and as a result, the remaining royal lords could no longer withstand the pressure of the assault and scattered in various directions. Zhongruo and did not give chase but instead took the opportunity to rush towards Rda. A feeling of doom washed over the royal lords at this sight. Zhongruo had resolved R's predicament by killing off many of the royal lords in the encirclement with her strength alone. And now, she was joining forces with to attack the remaining royal lords. How were they supposed to survive this onslaught? Seeing that the situation was not looking good for them, the royal lords besieging Rda hastily abandoned their opponent and fled in all directions. Rda naturally flew into a rage and chased after the fleeing royal lords, but his movements were slow and clumsy due to his enormous size, so how could he catch up to them? In the end, he was stopped by At this point, Rda had practically lost his ability to think rationally and was acting purely on his instincts. Thus, he immediately turned around and punched out. The punch caused to stagger and lose his balance. Fortunately, Rda realized that he had attacked the wrong person after the first strike and his anger immediately vanished. He then stood there awkwardly scratching his head. Among the two giant spirit gods, Rda had always been the most simple-minded. In comparison, there was no doubt that was the smarter one. That was also why Zhongruo had decided to rescue first when she had the opportunity to help them. "Come with me, we'll beat them up together," told Rda, then he turned around and charged towards the main battlefield. Rda obediently followed after his brother, quickly forgetting about how he was bullied by the royal lords earlier. On the main battlefield, the appearance of the three ninth-order divine spirits and the mighty current of the dragon pool had long since leveled the gap in military strength between the two sides. These changes allowed the allied army to gain the upper hand in the battle over time. Moreover, their advantage swiftly widened when the two giant spirit gods came forward to provide support. Everything had gotten better, and the situation was bound to improve even more. On the other side, Zhongruo was relentlessly chasing down the fleeing royal lords. Her speed was extraordinary. With the slightest flap of her wings, she could ignore the barriers of space and appear before any one of the royal lords in an instant. None survived the slash of the Heaven's Order sword. 1, 2, 5, 10. The royal lords who scattered and fled in all directions had no hope of surviving. On the contrary, their actions simply accelerated the arrival of their demise. When the royal lords finally realized their mistake, they hastily gathered together once more. Unfortunately, there were only some 40 royal lords remaining at this point. These royal lords were originally responsible for surrounding and besieging the giant spirit gods. There had been more than 100 of them in the beginning, but more than half had perished in such a short span of time. Having seen the situation on the main battlefield, they knew that the Black Ink clan had already lost the battle, but so what? As long as they had the Supreme One, they would never be defeated. What they needed to do now was preserve their strength as much as possible. When the Supreme One finished dealing with whatever matters it had to, they would rule the universe under the command of the Supreme One. With these considerations in mind, the royal lords gathered together but did not attack Zhong Ruoshi. They simply waited quietly and assumed a defensive posture. Holding the Heaven's Order sword in both hands, Zhong Ruoshi smiled slightly even though her complexion was as pale as a sheet. Their response perfectly aligned with her desires. If they had scattered and fled in different directions, then she would not have been able to eliminate them all. On the contrary, the fact that they gathered together in one place had certainly saved her the trouble of hunting them down. Needless to say, the situation was also a risk to her. If she failed to handle the situation properly, she would most likely suffer catastrophic consequences. Come. Zhong Ruoshi exhaled lightly and stabilized the power in her body. When she looked up, the vitality surrounding her began to boil and burn and she transformed into a stream of light that charged towards the royal lords. This was her last burst of strength, so she had to act swiftly. She had to finish dealing with these royal lords before the situation fell out of control. When the stream of light crashed into the royal lords, various howls of fury resounded. Blood splattered everywhere and dismembered limbs scattered across the void. Under the rain of sword slashes that ruthlessly came pouring down, the royal lords perished one after another. The entire incident seemed to last for only a brief moment, but at the same time, there was also a feeling that hundreds of thousands of years had passed in that brief moment. When Zhong Ruoshi finally stopped swinging her sword, the void was littered with the dismembered remains of the royal lords. The few survivors opposite her looked petrified. Those short few moments had deeply instilled the true meaning of despair in their hearts. In the face of absolute might, even royal lords like themselves were as weak as ant. Nevertheless, something unexpected occurred. Under the horrified gazes of the royal lords, Zhong Ruoshi's hands suddenly fell limply to the sides. The vitality that enveloped her body also became extremely weak at this moment. On the other hand, the terrifying aura within her became increasingly intense and unstable. "She's at her limits," one of the royal lords yelled in pleasant surprise. The royal lords had extremely keen vision, so they immediately noticed the changes when Zhong Ruoshi showed abnormal symptoms. At this moment, the few surviving royal lords finally glimpsed an opportunity to defeat this woman. Hence, they charged forward without hesitation. A sharp look flashed through Zhong Ruoshi's eyes, and she struggled to lift the Heaven's Order sword up again. Big Brother Huang's anxious shout entered her ears at that moment, "You'll die at this rate." A faint smile appeared on her face, but her hands did not loosen their grip on the sword, instead tightening even more as she answered calmly, "We all have a predestined time." Big Sister Lan called out anxiously, "If you die, Big Brother Huang's and my power will surely go out of control. Are you willing to watch this place turn into another chaotic dead territory?" There was no denying that Big Sister Lan was much better at reading hearts when it came to persuading others. Zhong Ruoshi was not afraid of death. If her death could bring victory to the human race, she would sacrifice herself without a second thought. However, there would be catastrophic consequences if she lost her life here. Without the coordination of the Heaven's Order bloodline, the power of the two ancient supreme beings would definitely spiral out of control. The enormous void would become another chaotic dead territory in an instant. If that were to happen, the Black Ink clan army would surely be eradicated, but unfortunately, the human race army scattered across the battlefield would also be dragged down with them. The human race had been fighting for millions of years just to obtain peace. At this point, they were only one step away from the dream of so many generations. How could Zhong Ruoxi destroy everything at such a critical moment? Martial Peak. Martial Peak, Chapter 5995, It's Not Enough, Martial Peak. After a brief hesitation, Zhong Ruoxi abruptly retreated. She no longer dared to carelessly activate the power within her, therefore, she could only avoid the attacks of the royal lords who were charging forward desperately. Seeing that, the royal lords pursued Zhong Ruoxi even more fiercely than before. Ripples suddenly spread out across the void, and in the next moment, a dark blue ice phoenix wrapped in a bone-chilling cold stepped out from the ripples and shot a blast of icy aura at the royal lords who were pursuing Zhong Ruoxi. The royal lords were startled by the unexpected arrival and quickly dodged. When they raised their heads once more, their hearts ran cold with fear. Following the appearance of the ice phoenix, several other figures stepped out from the ripples. They were none other than the Ninth Order human masters. The Allied army had completely seized the initiative on the main battlefield. They marched forward in high spirits, with their overwhelming advantage in battle steadily growing larger. Under such circumstances, the outcome of the battle was no longer in question. Their victory was only a matter of time at this point. It was for that reason that Mi Jinglun immediately sent reinforcements when he noticed Zhong Ruoxi's predicament. For the sake of ensuring Zhong Ruoxi's safety, he did not even hesitate to mobilize Su Yang, who had only just become a Ninth Order divine spirit. After repelling the royal lords who were pursuing Zhong Ruoxi, a flash of light appeared around the ice phoenix. The figure shrank rapidly to reveal Su Yang's appearance. She took a step forward and came to Zhong Ruoxi's side. Grabbing Zhong Ruoxi by the arm, she quickly made a few maneuvers and withdrew from the battlefield. Her next task was to protect Zhong Ruoxi until the battle ended. Once Su Yang retreated from the battlefield with Zhong Ruoxi, the Ninth Order Masters promptly found an opponent for themselves and clashed with the surviving royal lords. As time passed, powerful auras were eliminated one after another. The Masters from the Black Ink clan suffered heavy casualties, and the Black Ink clan army was steadily being eradicated. The small Stone Race army also suffered terrible casualties, but even their deaths played a huge role in the battle. From time to time, flashes of dazzling light would burst out across the battlefield. Those flashes were none other than purifying light. Everywhere the light illuminated, Black Ink strength dissipated and Black Ink clansmen howled in agony. The royal lords and territory lords were perishing all over, and this only accelerated with the destruction of the Black Ink clan army. At a certain moment, the last stubborn royal lord was finally eliminated. The remaining human race army looked around and realized that there were no other enemies around. The battle that lasted for several months with almost no time for respite finally ended with the victory of the Allied army. The small Stone Race army had suffered a heavy price for the victory. At this moment, less than 30% of their original numbers remained. As for the human race army, about 10 million troops remained when the entire human race army assembled together in one place. Even the number of Ninth Order Masters had reduced by more than half. Among the Ninth Order Masters who lost their lives in battle, most of them were those who advanced recently. Although they managed to break through to the Ninth Order Open Heaven realm, they barely had any time to stabilize and strengthen the foundation. Compared to the veteran Ninth Order Masters, their heritage and control over their own strength was undoubtedly weaker by a significant margin. Furthermore, there were also many injured and crippled among the survivors. The price of victory was extremely heavy, but the victory was ultimately worth the sacrifices. A heaven-shattering burst of cheers rang out soon after. The survivors screamed and rejoiced at the top of their voices, reveling in the ecstasy that overflowed from their hearts. Meanwhile, unlike the ordinary soldiers, the higher-ups in the human race army knew that this war was not over. Although they had finally eradicated the entirety of the Black Ink clan that escaped from the primordial heaven's source grand restriction, as long as Mo, the source of the Black Ink clan, was still alive, the Black Ink clan could rise once more. Despite fighting for months, Mo had never appeared on the battlefield. Yang Kai had not shown up either. It could be conceived that these two were battling each other somewhere in the depths of the void, and the outcome of their clash would determine the ultimate fate of the universe. Nobody knew the situation in the depths of the void. Zhong Ruoxi had indeed exchanged blows with Mo for a period, but so much time had passed since then that she could no longer judge the situation on the other side. For that reason, the Allied army only took a brief moment to rest and reorganize their formation after their victory. Then, they began marching into the depths of the void in hopes of helping Yang Kai. There was only one piece of good news that could be confirmed. Yang Kai was definitely alive. That was because they could sense a series of disturbances that were caused by a battle somewhere deep in the void. Those disturbances could only mean that Yang Kai currently had the capital to exchange blows with Mo. Passing through the site where the primordial heavens source grand restriction was originally located, the human race army was shocked by the sight that greeted their eyes. There were countless black ink nests scattered throughout the void. Moreover, precious high-rank black ink nests could be found everywhere. It was just that there was no sign of activity from any Black Ink clansmen even though there were so many Black Ink nests. Having dispatched all their military strength to the battlefield for the earlier battle, the Black Ink clan had been completely wiped out as a result. These Black Ink nests were nothing more than decorations now. However, what shocked the human race army was not the countless Black Ink nests scattered everywhere, but the gigantic figures dispersed throughout the void. Those figures were none other than Black Ink giant spirit gods. The outcome of the previous battle would have been even harder to determine if the Black Ink clan had dispatched these Black Ink giant spirit gods to the battlefield. In fact, there was a high possibility that the battle would have ended with the defeat of the Allied army. Fortunately, the Black Ink giant spirit gods were soul clones of Mo, so Mo had to inject a strand of his soul into these behemoths to make them move. Without a strand of Mo's soul, these Black Ink giant spirit gods were nothing more than empty shells. There was nothing the Black Ink clan could do about the Black Ink giant spirit gods even if they wanted to mobilize them. After passing through the void where the primordial heavens source grand restriction was previously located, the Allied army increased their pace. However, Jing Lun's expression grew increasingly solemn as they steadily marched forward. He originally brought the Allied army with the intention of helping Yang Kai, but he also knew that Mo was extremely powerful. The rumors claimed that Mo had reached the legendary creation realm. Even if the Allied army boasted massive numbers, they might not be of much help to Yang Kai. Be that as it may, he was currently faced with a dilemma. At present, it was no longer a question of whether the Allied army could provide any help to Yang Kai, but whether the Allied army could even continue their forward march under the current circumstances. As they marched forward, the shockwaves from the battle up ahead became increasingly terrifying. Even now, the mere fallout was enough to shake the entire void. The countless ripples that constantly spread out from the depths of the void were powerful enough to warp space despite their origin being beyond the horizon. Jing Lun soon realized that the intensity of the battle between Yang Kai and Mo was unprecedented. At this rate, it was evident that the Allied army would not be of any help. That was because they did not even have the qualification to approach the battlefield. If they forced their way forward, they would be crushed by the fallout before they even arrived. After considering the situation for a time, Jing Lun made a decisive decision. He ordered the Allied army to remain on standby at their current position. Then, he brought only the masters in or stronger than the Ninth Order with him and resumed their trek to the depths of the void. The small group traveled for some time before the situation on the battlefield finally came into view, but the sight that entered their eyes stopped them cold in their tracks and turned them pale with horror. It did not matter whether they were a Ninth Order master or a Ninth Order divine spirit. Even RDA and RE were no exception. Yang Kai stood in the void with the azure dragon spear in his hand. There seemed to be a small and slender spirit snake wrapped around the body of the spear. In addition, every thrust of his spear contained a heaven-destroying, earth-shattering force. The spirit snake was the manifestation of his space-time river. He had completely refined and absorbed Mu's space-time river into his body now, and although he was robbed of many benefits by Mo during the process, the benefits he gained had already pushed him to his limits. Hence, the fact that Mo had stolen some of the benefits did not affect the overall situation by much. The stolen benefits had only restored some of Mo's strength at most. The spirit snake wrapped around the azure dragon spear was Yang Kai's space-time river. It was the result he obtained after countless near-death encounters with Mo. The ability to condense the space-time river into this shape undoubtedly indicated that he had complete control over the power of the space-time river. The intensity and ferocity of this battle were something Yang Kai had never experienced before either. The slightest negligence would lead to his death, and he had indeed suffered several near-death experiences because of Mo. It was fortunate that he had always managed to avoid the worst outcome at the last moment. Mo's vicious attacks had allowed Yang Kai to rapidly gain control over the power of his space-time river. He had been no match for Mo in the beginning, but it had only taken him a few days to reach his current mastery. Originally, Yang Kai could only absorb the Tao strengths into his body by force. When he devoured and refined Mu's space-time river, he had swallowed Mu's space-time river whole and did his best to grasp as much of Mu's last gift as possible. If the Yang Kai from then was compared to a piece of raw ore, then his battles with Mo had been various forms of tempering and refinement. Every application of Tao strengths and every encounter with Mo had gradually increased his control over the power of the space-time river. The rough and ugly ore had been forged into a fine piece of metal now. At this moment, Yang Kai's understanding of the 10,000 Tao strengths had truly reached the peak of enlightenment. The strength he could now exert was no weaker than what Zhongruo she had previously displayed at her peak. Unfortunately, it was still not enough. If he wanted to slaughter Mo, then he had to overcome his limits in the Ninth Order Open Heaven realm and advance into a higher realm. Only then would he have hope of victory. However, his heritage was insufficient. How could Yang Kai easily overcome his limitations under these circumstances? Not even Mu could achieve such a feat. The more perfectly he could control his powers, the more aware Yang Kai became of his shortcomings. He couldn't reach a higher level of the martial Tao in such a short span of time. He would need to spend long years of precipitation and accumulation before he could ascend. Therefore, he sank into a vicious loop. As long as he failed to overcome his limitations, he would not be able to slaughter Mo. If he wanted to break through to a higher realm of the martial Tao, he would require more time. But, how could Mo allow him to have enough time to grow and develop? Ever since Yang Kai condensed his space-time river in the universe furnace, he had found his path to the future. It was just that he failed to realize his discovery until Mu pointed it out to him. Although he could now oppose Mo to a certain extent, he knew in his heart that this situation would not last for long. There were times when one simply lacked the necessary strength, and he was bound to become exhausted at some point. Unfortunately, the same could not be said of Mo. Mo was a strange existence that was born when heaven and earth split apart. As long as his source remained intact, his strength would never be depleted. Furthermore, he was supposedly in the creation realm already. Even if more than 30% of his source had been suppressed and sealed, he was still a mighty being in a realm above the open heaven realm. Yang Kai had finally seen the bizarre means of a being in that realm. Black ink strength that permeated the void could be transformed into a royal lord with a single touch from Mo. The ability to create something out of thin air was simply unimaginable. It was truly fortunate that Yang Kai's current strength was extraordinary, so even a royal lord would only pose a minimal threat to him. That was why Mo stopped using such ineffective tactics after a few attempts and decided to fight Yang Kai with his own strength instead. With each vicious exchange of blows, the violent aftermath that spread out in all directions caused the void to shudder and crack. During one of their confrontations, Yang Kai suddenly heard a slight sound coming from deep within his heart. At the same time, a strange sensation was also transmitted from his arm. Looking down at his arm, he couldn't help being shocked by the sight. A crack had appeared on the as till now indestructible azure dragon spear. Martial Peak. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.